Did you ever wanted to study abroad, but don't know where to start? Then look no further, because IES got you covered. With dozens of universities and courses ready for your choosing, you too can earn a world-class degree for an affordable price. In your time, indulge yourself in the rich and magnificent cultures of Bulgaria and Romania without any worries, because IES will help you every step of the way, from visa application to legalization of documents and more. For further information and inquiries, contact us now. International Admission Services, making dreams come true since 2012.
Hi, welcome to Health Talk with Dr. Akram. I'm Akram. Generally we talk about medicine in my program, but today I thought to talk something different because this month, October, is Black History Month in the UK. So let's talk about Black History Month. So sit back, relax and enjoy your time with us. Last year, 400 years after shackled Africans first set foot in the English colony of Virginia, a team of underwater archaeologists announced that the charred, sunken remains of Clotilda, that last known slave ship to reach US shores, had been discovered near Mobile, Alabama. In 1860, 52 years after the United States had banned the import of slaves, a wealthy landowner hired the schooner and its captain to smuggle more than 100 African captives to Alabama, a crime punishable by hanging. Once the nefarious mission was accomplished, the ship was set ablaze to destroy the evidence. The captives were the last of an estimated 307,000 Africans delivered into bondage in mainland America from the early 1600 to 1860, making the Clotilda an infamous bookend to what has long been called America's original sin.
Jump! Daddy took whippings night and day to protect his name.
Speak to me, Lord! Speak to me, Lord!
Think I don't know he my daddy?
If you ever touch just one, I'll kill you.
You brought this upon yourself and upon your poor family.
No! You brought it on my family! No, don't take it!
After the Civil War ended in America, the slavery was abolished. The displaced Africans from the Clotilda put down roots as free Americans, but they didn't relinquish their African identities. Settling among the woods and marshes upriver from Mobile, they built simple homes, planted gardens, tended livestock, hunted, fished, and farmed. Many of their descendants still live there today. The story of these extraordinary people, their trials and triumphs, their sufferings and resilience, and their achievements in various fields of life is not to be forgotten. The Slavery Abolition Act of 1833 formally freed 800,000 Africans who were then the legal property of Britain's slave owners. What is less well known is that the same act contained a provision for the financial compensation of the owners of those slaves by the British taxpayers for the loss of their property. The Compensation Commission was the government body established to evaluate the claims of the slave owners and administer the distribution of the 20 million the government had set aside to pay them off. That sum represents 40% of the total government expenditure for 1834. It is a modern equivalent of between 16 billion and 17 billion pounds. The compensation of Britain's 46,000 slave owners was the largest bailout in British history until the bailout of the banks in 2009. Not only did the slaves receive nothing, under another clause of the Act, they were compelled to provide 45 hours of unpaid labor each week for their former masters for a further 4 years after their supposed liberation. In effect, the enslaved paid part of the bill for their own manumission. Faced with subjugation and brutality, Africans as free men in the UK and America needed inspirational examples, models of achievements to follow. Black leaders wanted white Americans to see inspiring figures too, to counter the pernicious stereotypes popularized. Taking on the mission was historian Carter G. Woodson, who in 1926 established Negro History Week, the precursor to today's Black History Month. Black History Month in the UK, where we revisit the stories of notable Africans in UK and USA, and we celebrate it in October. Lists of these prominent individuals and their contributions serve as a powerful testimonial to Black ingenuity. Before we go and talk about achievements of Black people, I would like to bring to your notice about James Marion Sims, who was a physician in 1800s. He was an American and pioneer in the field of surgery, both known as the father of modern gynecology and as a controversial figure for the ethical questions raised in developing his techniques. His most significant work was the development of a surgical technique for the repair of vesico-vaginal fistula, a severe complication of obstructed childbirth, which was very common those days. He is also remembered for inventing Sims speculum, Sims sigmoid catheter, and Sims position. However, as medical ethicist, one would be hard pressed to find a more controversial figure in the history of medicine. Sims perfected his surgical techniques by operating without anesthesia on enslaved black women. In the 20th century, this was condemned as an improper use of human experimental subjects, and Sims was described as a prime example of progress in the medical profession made at the expense of vulnerable population. Sims' practices were defended as consistent with the era in which he lived by physician and anthropologist L. Lewis Wall. And according to Sims, the enslaved black women were willing and had no better option. Well, in Montgomery between 1845 and 1849, Sims conducted experimental surgery on 12 enslaved women with fistulas in his backyard hospital. He named 3 enslaved women in his records, Anaka, Betsy and Lucy. Each suffered from fistula and all were subjects of his surgical experimentation. He conducted experimental surgery on each of them several times, operating on Anaka 30 times before the repair of her fistula was declared success. She had both vesico-vaginal and recto-vaginal fistulas, which he struggled to repair. Sims ignored the AMA's code of ethics and Jones' counsel, notwithstanding repeated failures during 4 years' time. He kept his 6 patients and operated until he tired out of his doctor assistants and finally had to rely upon his patients to assist him to operate. Why I talk about Sims here? Because not what he achieved, for what the poor African slaves gone through to enable us to understand this medicine, the gynecology. This is Anaka, Betsy, Lucy, and others unnamed African ladies. Your commitment to science and gynecology on your will or by force will not be forgotten. Let's go back to some Africans who had achieved. Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler, 1831-1895. Dr. Rebecca Lee Crumpler was the first black woman doctor in the United States of America, obtaining her medical degree during 1864 amidst American Civil War. Her early career was in nursing, but her transition into becoming a doctor would be difficult as it took her several letters of recommendation from doctors she used to work for before she was finally admitted a place to study at the New England Female Medical College, currently known as Boston University School of Medicine. Dr. Crumpler went on to work as a general practitioner and sought to help the large number of black people who would otherwise not have had access to medical care after the American Civil War. Let's look at Patricia Barth, first black female physician awarded a patent for a medical invention. Patricia Barth received her medical degree from Harvard University College of Medicine in Washington, D.C. Dr. Barth's accomplishments include the invention of new device and technique for cataract surgery known as laser phaco, for which she was the first black woman to receive a medical patent. The technique still works and we still use it in hospitals. That's amazing. Let's look at Robert Boyd, president and co-founder of the first professional organization for black physicians. Charles Drew, first to use blood plasma and to store blood for transfusion. Charles Drew pioneered methods of storing blood plasma for transfusion and organized the first large-scale blood bank in the US during World War II. And we still benefit from his techniques. William Himpton, first black physician to teach at Harvard Medical School. Daniel Williams, one of the first physicians to perform a successful open heart surgery, founded the first interracial and black-owned hospital. Let's look at the black inventors of time, not medicine anymore. Louis Howard Latimer, 1848-1928, was an American patent draftsman for the patents of the incandescent light bulbs, among other inventions. In 1874, Latimer co-patented with Charles M. Brown an improved toilet system for railroad cars called the water closet for railroad cars, WCs. In 1876, Alexander Graham Bell employed Latimer, then a draftsman at Bell's patent law firm, to draft the necessary drawings required to receive a patent for Bell's telephone. Latimer received a patent on January 17, 1882 for the process of manufacturing carbons, an improved method for the production of carbon filament for light bulbs. The Edison Electric Light Company in New York City hired Latimer in 1884 as a draftman and an expert witness in patent litigation on electric lights, while at Edison, Latimer wrote the first book on electric lighting, entitled Incandescent Electric Lighting, that was in 1890, and supervised the installation of public electric lights throughout New York, Philadelphia, Montreal, and of course London. Gareth Augustus Morgan Sr., 1877-1963, was an African-American inventor, businessman, and community leader. His most notable inventions were a 3-position traffic signal and a smoke hood, a predecessor to the gas mask notably used in 1916 tunnel construction disaster rescue. Morgan also discovered and developed a chemical hair processing and a straightening solution. Well, look at why did he start this traffic light? The first American-made automobiles were introduced to consumers just before the turn of the 20th century, and pedestrians, bicycles, animal-drawn wagons, animals, and motor vehicles all had to share the same roads. There were not many rules by then. Morgan had witnessed a serious accident at an intersection, and he filed the patent for a traffic control device having a 3rd warning position in 1922. The patent was granted in 1923, and we still benefit from that traffic light. Madam C.J. Walker, 1867-1919, was an American entrepreneur, philanthropist, and political and social activist. She is recorded as the first female self-made millionaire in America in the Guinness Book of World Records. George Washington Carver, 1860-1943, was an American agricultural scientist and inventor who promoted alternative crops to cotton and methods to prevent soil depletion. He was the most prominent black scientist of the early 20th century. Carver developed techniques to improve soil depleted by repeated planting of cotton. He urged farmers to restore nitrogen to their soil by practicing systematic crop rotation, alternating cotton crops with planting of sweet potatoes, peanuts, soybeans, and cowpeas. We still use the same technique these days. Elia J. McCoy, 1844-1929, was a Canadian-born inventor and engineer of African-American descent, who was notable for his 57 US patents, most having to do with lubrication of steam engines. Charles B. Brooks, inventor. Unlike the other sweepers at the time, 1890, this is about road sweeping machines. Brooks' sweeper was the first self-propelled street sweeping truck. His design had revolving brushes attached to the front fender, and the brushes were interchangeable so that when snow fell, scrapers could be attached for snow removal as well. Well, look at something else. Let's look at sports, boxing. Everybody know about Muhammad Ali, born as Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr., January 17, 1940, was an American professional boxer, activist, and philanthropist, nicknamed the Greatest. He is widely regarded as one of the most significant and celebrated figures of the 20th century and as one of the greatest boxers of all time. There's so many musicians to talk about. Let me name a few of them. Louis Armstrong, Jimi Hendrix, Aretha Franklin, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, Tina Turner, of course, King of the Rock, Michael Jackson. Let's look at the politics. Barack Obama, born as Barack Hussein Obama II, August 4, 1961, is an American politician and attorney who served as the 44th President of the United States from 2009 to 2017. Barack Obama served as the 44th President of the United States. That's impossible, being a black descent. His story is American story, values from the heartland, middle-class upbringing, and a strong family, hard work, and education as the means of getting ahead, and the conviction that a life so blessed should be lived in service to others. While we're talking about politics, we cannot forget about Nelson Mandela. Of course, he was from South Africa. He had fought apartheid regime for a long time. He was in prison. Then, of course, the determination made him to be the president of the country. And once he was in the chair, he forgave all of his enemies. And that's an amazing example. Let's talk about Martin Luther King Jr., born Michael King Jr., 1929-1968, was an American Christian minister and activist who became the most visible spokesperson and leader in the civil rights movement from 1955 until his assassination in 1968. King is best known for advancing civil rights through non-violence and civil disobedience, inspired by his Christian belief and the non-violent activism of Mahatma Gandhi. Martin Luther King's last speech. Let's say a few words about it. I say to you today, my friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It's a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold this truth to be self-evident that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day in the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, the state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream. Thank you very much for being with us on our special edition on